Welcome back to the Mighty Habits Podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Steve. And man, oh man, I got a deep dive for you all today. We're going to be wading into some seriously deep waters, the kind of ideas that have shaped global history and still cause huge arguments online even today. So get ready because you're going to use your brains for this one, folks. We're going to be unpacking all these potent concepts about social and economic forces and hey, maybe even, questioning some of your own assumptions along the way. That's the beauty of a good deep dive, right? It shakes things up. Now, fair warning, this one's going to be a real head scratcher. We're going deep into a world of haves and have-nots, revolution, and a vision of society totally unlike our own. I'm talking about the kind of ideas that sent shockwaves through the 19th century and honestly still ripple through our world today. You intrigued? You should be. All right, let's get started. So imagine a world split in two. On one side, you have the bourgeoisie, the folks who own all the factories, the land, the capital. They call the shots.
They set the rules and basically control the whole economic game. Then on the other side, you have the proletariat. These are the workers, the people who have to sell their labor just to survive. They don't own anything. They just operate the stuff the bourgeoisie own. Now, what we're going to be looking at today argued that this whole setup, this whole capitalism thing, creates a fundamental tension. The bourgeoisie are driven by profit, right? So they're constantly trying to squeeze more and more out of the proletariat. And the workers, well, they're just struggling to make ends meet. I mean, it's like a recipe for conflict, don't you think? And it's not even just about the money. It goes deeper than that, like how this system alienates workers from their own labor. You know you're not building a chair because you love carpentry. You're doing it for a paycheck. You're just another cog in the machine, totally disconnected from what you're actually making. Pretty bleak picture, huh? But here's where things get really interesting. Our writer argued that capitalism, with all its problems, is unsustainable in the long run. He predicted that eventually the proletariat would just get fed up. They'd rise up and overthrow the bourgeoisie and then bam, totally new society. No classes, no private property. The means of production would be owned by everybody. Communism, I know what you're thinking. Revolution, that sounds a little intense. And yeah, it's a pretty radical idea, but you got to understand the context, This guy was writing during peak industrialization. Cities were exploding with new factories, and the workers were stuck in these awful, brutal conditions. So yeah, it makes sense that this vision of a classless society free from exploitation really resonated with people. I mean, wouldn't it resonate with you? Of course, history took a different path. Even though the ideas in this work inspired tons of movements and revolutions all over the world, a truly classless communist society never really happened. But that doesn't mean these ideas are irrelevant today. I mean, think about it. We still deal with inequality, right? We see the power struggles between workers and the people who control the capital. And there's this feeling that the economic system just isn't working for everybody. Maybe we're not about to have a communist revolution or anything. But the questions this guy was asking are still super relevant. How do we create a more fair, a more just society? What's the role of work in our lives? How do we make sure that everyone benefits from economic progress? These are things we should be thinking about, even if you don't agree with all the answers our writer came up with. So next time you're reading the news and you see a story about economic inequality or some big labor strike, remember these ideas. Okay, they might just give you a whole new way of looking at the world. And that's it for a deep dive, folks. Until next time, keep those mighty habits going.
Oh, and never stop questioning the world around you.
Okay, so what was the solution, according to this writer? Well, he basically thought we needed a total system reboot. He thought capitalism with all its flaws and baggage was just doomed to fail. Eventually, he thought the proletariat would just say, enough is enough. And they would rise up, overthrow the bourgeoisie, and create a whole new society from scratch. And in this new society, there would be no classes, no private property, and all the means of production would be owned collectively. Communism. No, I get it. I get it. Revolution sounds a little intense, maybe even a bit scary. But you got to remember the historical context. This guy was writing at a time when industrialization was changing everything. Cities were packed with these giant factories and workers were toiling away in some pretty terrible conditions. So yeah, it makes sense that this idea of a classless society where everyone's equal and there's no exploitation would really appeal to people. It sounds pretty good on paper, right? But of course, history took a bit of a detour. Even though this work inspired all kinds of movements and revolutions all over the world, we never really saw that perfect communist society come to be. But that doesn't mean these ideas are just some dusty relic of the past. Because think about it for a second. We're still dealing with a lot of the same issues today. Inequality is still a huge problem. The balance of power between workers and capital is still wonky, and it often feels like the system just isn't working for everyone. Maybe we're not on the verge of a full-blown communist revolution or anything like that. But the questions this guy was asking are still so relevant.
Like, how do we create a society that's truly fair and just? What role should work play in our lives? And how do we make sure that the benefits of economic progress are shared by everyone, not just a select few? These are questions we're thinking about even if you don't agree with all the answers our writer came up with. So the next time you're scrolling through the news and you see a story about income inequality or workers going on strike, remember these core ideas, because they might just give you a fresh perspective on the world we live in. And that's it for our deep dive this week, folks. Until next time, keep those mighty habits going and never stop questioning the world around you.